Very good morning to all of you. Today is the eighth day of the ICPS sponsored special lecture series on values and well-being, classical and contemporary Indian philosophical perspectives. To celebrate the to celebrate the Indian Philosophers Day, today we have with us Professor Shraddha Kumbhajkar, Department of Philosophy, Savitribai Phule University, Maharashtra. Now, I would like to request Ananya Pal to deliver welcome address and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Devamrita. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, respected speaker, my senior and junior colleagues of the academia, dear students and participants. I welcome you all on behalf of the Department of Philosophy, Kaji Nazrul University, Asansol, West Bengal, to the seventh lecture of the ICPR sponsored special lecture series on values and well-being, classical and contemporary Indian philosophical perspectives. We express our gratitude to the Indian Council of Philosophical Research for facilitating this priceless academic exchange to mark the celebration of Indian Philosophers' Day. We are also ever grateful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Shadhan Chakraborty for encouraging us to undertake various programs and mentoring us throughout the process. Today, we are extremely honored and fortunate to have with us Professor Shraddha Kumbhojkar, Professor and Head, Department of History, Savitribai Phule, Pune University, Maharashtra. She is also the Director, Additional Charge, Center for Asian Studies of the university. Professor Kumbhojkar is one of the very few persons holding a dual master's degree, one in Sanskrit, another in history. Her areas of expertise are wide and include historiography, Maharashtra in the 19th century, Marathi theatre, nationalism, modernity and Europe, memory studies, Dalit studies, Vedic literature, and Sanskrit. Professor Shraddha Kumbhojkar has authored several major books and articles in different areas and has delivered lectures at numerous national and international platforms. She is a member of various important academic bodies and have organized countless seminars and workshops. Among other things, her contribution to the study of Marathi literary and cultural history is immense. Today, ma'am will be delivering her lecture on the sub-theme Social Values and Well-being from the viewpoint of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule. We express our heartiest thanks to ma'am for giving us her valuable time from her very busy schedule. All of us are eagerly awaiting to listen to you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Aparna. Am I right in pronouncing the name?
Ma'am, it's Ananya.
Ananya. Ananya. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for inviting me over to this gathering of distinguished scholars and colleagues and students from Kazi Nazrul University in West Bengal. I express my heartfelt thanks to my student here. I can see Somdatta is here. Shom has been our student in our department. So this is how we get to meet these days with the pandemic. Much as we would like to meet each other in person, but this is what we have to make do with. But I also think that it's really nice that we are making use of this pandemic as an opportunity to interact without the constraints of physical travel and all those things. So we are making use of this opportunity to interact with people from various locations. So in that sense, I'm ever grateful to you, ma'am, and the head of the Department of Philosophy and the ICPI. Little bit of a um, correction, if you like. In my CV, I am heading the Department of History and not philosophy, though I am very much interested in the philosophy of history, but not really heading the Department of Philosophy here in Savitribai Phule, Pune University. You might be surprised, where is this Savitribai Phule Pune University? And this is because the name has changed over the last few years. 2014 to be precise, the name was changed to as a mark of respect to Savitribai Phule, who was, as we all know, not only the wife of Jyotirao Phule, but she was a pioneer of female education as far as the Bombay Presidency and this part of South Asia is concerned. So I will not say that she was the first person or Mahatma Phule was the first person to begin women's education. There have been attempts, especially by the missionaries, and we cannot really neglect their contribution in imparting education to the natives. But Mahatma Phule, Savitribai Phule and their colleagues such as Fatima B. Sheikh and many others, who they made important efforts in bringing education to the doorsteps of the people that they called Shudrati Shudras, that is people who were considered as low castes, people belonging to the low classes, people belonging to the low finance, low income groups, so on and so forth. Generally, people who were deprived of status and privileges in life. I'm really proud that my university is named after Savitribai Phule, and it is a very, very proper, pertinent recognition to her contribution to the cause of not just women's education, but to the cause of education in general. With that note, with that tribute to Savitribai Phule and to Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, maybe it's time for us to start thinking about what were their concepts, what is it that led to these people thinking about what our society should be like, what should be what I'm going to call in this presentation a utopia for our society. So I'll just share the presentation with you. Hopefully the title slide is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, just let me also make sure that I see everyone else as well from the call. Yeah. Now you can see the title slide and I can see your names. Is that working fine?
Yes, ma'am. You can see the title slide.
You are only seeing the title slide.
No, ma'am, it's not in presentation mode, ma'am. You can see the site also.
Yeah, okay, great. So at any point of time, if you think that, or if you feel that you can't see the slide properly, please just speak up and let me know that you can't see the slide properly, because it won't be many pictures, but a lot of words definitely, and not many slides as well. I hope to discuss things with you in the sense that I understand that perhaps Jyotirao Phule's ideology, his life and works may not be something that is very familiar to everyone in West Bengal, but I'm sure that as a part of the whole syllabus which speaks of social reform movements in the 19th century, what has come to be called as the Indian Renaissance. We know that there are two locations as far as this whole reform movement is concerned in the 19th century. And one of them is Bengal and the other is Maharashtra. So in the 19th century, we know that there is this flowering of ideologies. There is this tremendous churning of ideas, tremendous amount of dialogue, discussion, dissent, even quarrels between what has come to be known as the traditional way of thinking and the modern way of thinking. So in this presentation, I'm going to try and see if there are certain values, there are certain ideas of well-being that Phule has advocated. And please feel free to just speak up at any point of time. Also, I plan to end around 12:15 so that we can have at least 15 minutes for questions and answers. Okay. What I'm planning to discuss here is the ideas of utopia as Mahatma Phule has envisaged. But before we go into that kind of a detail, perhaps something about the concept of utopia might be relevant of use. I know that all of you are academics. Maybe some inputs from you as to what is utopia. Can somebody tell me what is utopia?
Ma'am, utopia is actually मैम जो काल्पनिक होता है उसको यूटोपिया बोलते हैं.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. U and topos. Topos is land and U is something that is imaginary. तो मैत्री जी आपने जो बोला वो बिल्कुल सही है. Utopia is an imaginary land. Imaginary land. And that's why I have shared the picture of the first page of this famous book by Thomas More called as Utopia here. And on the left side of the book, you will see that there is this island which has been drawn, and the island is full of people. It is isolated from all, the rest of the world by, water on all sides. And inside, there is this ideal society that Thomas More has envisaged. So that's about the book written by Thomas More centuries ago. But we all know that an imaginary land which has all the ideal according to whoever is thinking about the imaginary land, ideal features, characteristics. This is not something new. In all situations, all societies, people have always thought of such an imaginary land, such a utopia. One example that I have given on the right side of the slide is of a Sanskrit saying which says, Sarvetra Sukhina Santu, let everyone be happy, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, let everyone be healthy, no diseases should be there. Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, let everyone see good things happening. And ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Nobody should have pain, or nobody should have dukkha. That is, what is the right word for dukkha? Pain? Sorrow? Yeah, yes, sorrow perhaps. Nobody should have sorrow in their destiny. That is an ideal concept of a life or worldview. Can you tell me something about such other utopias in your different languages, perhaps, or in literature? There are always people who have, imagined such ideal situations. We are all philosophy people here, so philosophy speaks of an ideal world, though it also talks about helping people who are not in the perfect situation, but it also talks of what are the ideals. So is there a utopia in your native language or in any piece of literature that you have come across?
The ideal state, ma'am.
Yes, Maitri.
Ma'am, I some वो आइडियल स्टेट का जो जो एक काल्पनिक ये था वो प्लेटो या लॉक, आई एम थोड़ा कंफ्यूजिंग, जहाँ पर फिलोसोफर फिलोसोफर किंग एक सोचा गया था आइडियल स्टेट का जो कॉन्सेप्ट था वो भी यूटोपियन जैसा था,
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
क्योंकि वहाँ पर ऐसा स्टेट का इमेजिन किया जा रहा था कि जहाँ पर जो, यस मैम,
No, nothing. Yes.
Maitri, continue. You can continue.
Maybe
हिंदी तो बोलो।
two devices are on. One laptop.
Yeah. Speak in Hindi. Yeah.
Yes, but the point. Yeah, Maitri, go ahead.
मैम जो लॉक का जो आइडियल स्टेट था शायद शायद प्लेटो का था, ये मैं थोड़ा कंफ्यूज हो गई हूँ, लेकिन ये बात है कि वहाँ पर जो आइडियल स्टेट का जो कॉन्सेप्ट था उसमें भी ये वो जो कॉन्सेप्ट था वो भी यूटोपियन ही था, क्योंकि वहाँ पर जैसे इमेजिन किया जा रहा था वो थोड़ा सा रियलिटी में अप्लाई करने के लिए थोड़ा सा उसमें प्रॉब्लम था। यही एक्चुअली बंगाली में बोल रहे तो कुछ आप तो समझा सकते हो, लेकिन थोड़ा सा दिक्कत हो रहा है अभी लैंग्वेज में।
कोई बात नहीं।
ओके मैम, यू कैन कंटिन्यू मैम।
Thank you, Maitri. So, very correctly, she has pointed out that in Plato's writings, there is this concept of philosopher king. Also, there are various other, not just Greek philosophers, there are ancient Indian philosophers, there are Arabic philosophers who speak of an ideal world. There are also imaginations about a dystopia, dystopia. So there are people who have imagined a land which is full of all the undesirable things also, and there are people who have imagined a land which is full of an ideal world also. Speaking to a West Bengal University audience, maybe Chitta Jetha Bhayashunya Unnat Jetha Matha, that is also a conception of a utopia by Tagore. So there are many such versions of utopia which have been put forth. Gandhi's concept of Hindu Swaraj is also an ideation of an ideal world. Why I'm spending so much of time on the various concepts of utopia is that we are going to speak about how Phule envisaged an ideal world. And hence, I thought it might be pertinent to point out what can be an ideal world. But before that, a little story. I'm sure you know what the story is about. Can you describe the story? Any one of you?
I would like the students to speak. Anyone
Yes,
from the
please.
students?
Have you heard this story before?
Yeah, ma'am.
Go ahead and tell, please.
Yeah. This wolf was wanted to have the bread from the crow's mouth, so he was praising him, and he was so flattered that he wanted to respond, and then the bread fell on the ground, and the jackal had it. Jackal or wolf, whatever, had it. That's the story from Aesop's fable.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Ananya. Yes, so this story is well known to all of us. It has come to us through a number of folk tales. Many times we are told that the story is of the stupid crow and the cunning fox. So the adjectives that are used for the crow and the fox are also quite remarkable in the sense that they tell us about who the storyteller is siding on, who are they partial to. So many a times we are told the story as if the crow is a stupid person and as if the fox is somebody who's very, very intelligent, in the sense that the fox praises the crow and the food falls down from the beak of the crow. Imagine though the thing in a different fashion. Imagine that you are in the position of the crow and it's almost lunchtime, just after the lecture. So imagine that you have to go for lunch and somebody snatches away your thali, your food. Will you narrate the incident in such a fashion that I was stupid and somebody took my food away, or my friend was stupid and I took her food away? Would you be describing this in such fashion, or would you say that I was a bad person, or somebody was a bad person and they snatched away the food from my friend or from me? In that case, will the fox be the hero or the villain? Simple question. If it is you in the place of the crow, will the fox be the hero or the villain?
The villain, of course.
Why?
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to portray myself as a fool. Rather, it is a tendency of the people to play victim rather than blaming oneself that I have been callous or I have been a fool. So people take this opportunity to play the victim. Yeah.
Yes, that is one. Any other answers? अगर हमारा खाना कोई छीन लेता है तो क्या हम उसे अक्लमंद बोलेंगे या हम उसे विलन बोलेंगे?
मैम देखिए, अगर मेरा कोई खाना छीन रहा है तो ये तो मेरा भी एक डिसेबिलिटी है कि मैं उसको अपने पास रख नहीं पा रही हूँ। उसका अक्लमंदी भी है, ठीक है। एक नजर से हम देखेंगे तो उसको सभी विलेन ही कहेगा, लेकिन वो भी अक्लमंद भी तो है, क्योंकि ये मेरा डिसेबिलिटी है। वो उसको फायदा हो रहा है। वो मेरे बारे में, मेरा डिसेबिलिटी को जानता है कि कोई मेरा थोड़ा सा ऐसा मुझे इम्प्रेसिव कुछ बातें कर देगा तो मैं थोड़ा सा ढीली पड़ जाऊंगी, तो वो अपना मुझसे मेरा खाना छीन सकता है। तो ये मेरा डिसेबिलिटी है। दिस एंगल से वो क्लेवर है, और ये मेरा डिसेबिलिटी है कि उसको पता है कि मेरा कमजोरी क्या है।
Yes, thank you. Any different perspective? कोई और कुछ कहना चाहेगा इसके बारे में? शायद नहीं। नो प्रॉब्लम।
मैम, और एक पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है। जैसे हमारा समाज में जैसे चल रहा है कि कमजोर का ऊपर कोई मेरा अधिकार छीन रहा है, ये इस एंगल से भी हम लोग इसको देख सकते हैं, क्योंकि वो खाना मेरा अधिकार था, लेकिन वो अपने स्मार्टनेस से कुछ ऐसे चीज मेरे सामने रख के कि कुछ भी ऐसे अपने फायदे के लिए वो मेरा कमजोरी का इस्तेमाल करके मेरा अधिकार से मुझे वंचित कर रहा है। ये इस एंगल से भी हम इसको देख सकते हैं, क्योंकि समाज में ऐसा ही होते आ रहा है। ये बहुत प्रचलित बात है। इस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से हम लोग देख सकते हैं इसको।
जी। Thank you, Maitri. So, yes, this is how a picture can be interpreted in different ways. On one side, you can think that this is an intelligent move on the part of the fox. On the other side, you may think that this is something that the fox has not done in an ethical fashion, and it is the right of the crow to have her own food, but the fox is snatching away her food. Why I'm showing you this story is because I'm sure you have guessed that there are always two ways of looking at things as far as our, any event in the society is concerned. Not only two, of course, there are multiple ways of looking at it, but here I'm talking of the dominant narrative, and I'm talking of the what may be called as the subaltern narrative. Though we all know that the subaltern, the school of history has kind of disbanded itself and all of that. But we can say that there is a privileged narrative and there is the narrative from the underprivileged people. जिसकी रोटी छीनी गई है उसकी एक कथा होगी, जिसने रोटी छीनी है उसकी एक कहानी होगी. So, point being that here, and I've quoted from Justice Ranade's writings, edited by his wife at a later stage. So, what he says is that there are many social evils that have been complained of in these days. But he says that once upon a time, in the days of our highest glory, we had a different scenario altogether. And we are not imitating any foreign models, but we are restoring the ancient freedom, dignity in the place of subsequent corruption. So he's saying that once upon a time, our Indian society was in great form. We had equality, we had all those great things, freedom, dignity, all those things. And subsequently, there were certain what he calls corruptions. Now, he may be implying the medieval period, or he may also be implying the British period. We don't know what he's really indicating. But basically, he's Justice Ranade, who's a contemporary of Mahatma Phule, his view, and that was indeed the dominant view as far as the colonial intelligentsia was concerned, is that once upon a time we had everything fine, and then came the medieval period. Perhaps he may be blaming the Mughals for the change that has happened. Perhaps he may be blaming the British for the change that has happened. But he is saying that now is the time for us to restore the ancient, what he calls freedom and dignity in the place of subsequent corruptions. Phule has obviously something different to say. And let me just share that. What Ranade calls as freedom and dignity in ancient India, Phule has a different picture to show, or Phule has a different narrative of the same story. That's why I showed you the crow and the cunning fox story, because the fox and the fox's descendants, they may have a different story to tell, but the crow and the crow's descendants, they will have a different story to tell. The fox might say that my great-grandfather was a very intelligent fox and he did this to a stupid crow, and that's how my great-grandfather survived in difficult times. And it was such a brilliant time once upon a time, and I'm going to imbibe the values of intelligence and values of enterprise as shown, displayed by my great-grandfather. But the crow will have a different story, as Maitri rightly pointed out, and Ananya also rightly pointed out, that they will have a different narrative because they are the ones who have been at the receiving end of the injustice. Phule, here you can see the quotation. I hope you can see the quotation. What does he say? He says, have you or your wives and children had the misfortune to do manual labor on a hungry stomach? Or has any of the Brahmins carried night soil on his shoulders? So he's basically trying to say that when you are talking of ancient freedom, ancient dignity, all those things, are you really talking about my ancestors, or are you having a completely different picture of a society which is completely imaginary? Here we are talking of the dichotomy that Phule is trying to posit before his readers. He's saying that, okay, it's all very fine for you to say that once upon a time there was this ancient land of learning. We had a great, dialogue and discussions and debates and philosophy and spirituality and liberty of mind, all those things happening. But he says, what is it that was happening on the ground? Did you or your ancestors ever actually physically had to go through the physical labor of doing things at such a menial level, carrying the night soil on their shoulders? You know that in the Bombay presidency, up until recently, up until the last few decades, there were these toilets where the night soil had to be carried physically over by the people who were involved in the menial jobs. So it was only with great efforts on the part of a number of social organizations that drainage system was improved. So we boast of 5,000-year-old Mohenjo-daro and Harappa and all those things, and the underground drainage system and all those things. But what is happening on the ground in the 19th century? And Phule makes no bones about it. He doesn't hide those things, and he says that this is the ground reality. So point that I'm trying to drive at is, when we are talking of the 19th century, when we are talking of the Indian Renaissance, when we are talking of this great social reform movements happening, Phule takes a completely different route as compared to other philosophers, thinkers, and social reformers of the period. That's what I wanted to stress, and hence so much of preliminary discussion. Okay. Who is Phule and what does he do? Phule, his name is Jyoti Rao, and Jyoti Ba is also an epithet that is given, but the way he signs his name is Jyoti Rao Phule. And why I'm stressing this is that there is a bit of cultural politics in calling him Jyoti Ba also. Jyoti Ba is indicative of lower caste, or the way in which names are given to lower caste persons, and Jyoti Rao is something that is more honorific. So he himself called, he himself wrote down his name as Jyoti Rao Govind Rao Phule. So I think it is prudent for us to call him Jyoti Rao instead of the other name that is given by perhaps people with different ideas in their minds, which is Jyoti Ba. So better to call him Jyoti Rao Phule, as he would have preferred to call himself. He was born in 1827 and passed away in 1890. So had a decent life of about 63 years. I'm not sure as to how much you are comfortable with the details of Phule's life, but suffice it to say that he lived in a time period when the British Raj was on the rise in the first half of the 19th century in the Bombay presidency. 1818 is the period when the Marathas get defeated and the British establish themselves in Pune and the whole Bombay presidency area. And Phule is born in this part of nearby Pune. He came from a family of gardeners, so his caste was that of gardeners, and this is also something that is relevant because he does not come from the high caste as many other social reformers of this period come from. Maybe you are aware that the whole Bengal Renaissance, as it is called, is something wherein we can see all the what are called as Bhadralok, the high caste middle class or upper middle classes people are dominant in the Bengal Renaissance. Similarly, also in the Renaissance in Maharashtra, or the ideological upheaval in Maharashtra, if not Renaissance, we find that people belonging to the high castes and middle classes are at the forefront. All these people whose names we are very familiar with, Ranade, Tilak, Gokhale, Chiplankar, even later on Mahatma Gandhi, Jinnah, these people come from high castes and middle and higher middle classes. So financially they come from not wealthy but well provided for families. Phule is different in the sense that he comes from the caste of gardeners. I won't say that he had a poor family background. His father was also a middle class person. But it's important that he is not from the high caste. Though he does not come from the untouchable caste also, he comes from the middle level caste from the 19th century. Why am I stressing on this caste background? It's not because I am casteist, or it's not because I am trying to underline the social location of Phule. What I want to stress on is that his lived experience was completely different than the lived experiences of, for example, Ranade, Tilak, Chiplankar, Gokhale, so on and so forth. He had a completely different perspective towards the society. He had a completely different understanding of the social relations, which helped him in realizing what should be done in order to improve our society. What should be an ideal society if we are to have a dream. So Jyotirao Phule has this social caste background, and he also was a person who was lucky in the sense that he got a bit of, not a bit of, quite a bit of, he matriculated thanks to missionary school. So matriculation in those days meant that he had to do a lot of reading, Thomas Paine and others. So he knew English, he knew Marathi, and he knew that it is important for everyone to have education in order to emancipate in terms of your thoughts, not just for your getting a job and getting a decent livelihood, but also for emancipation of your mind. It's important to take education. So after matriculation, as per the customs of those days, we all know that children used to get married, children were married off by their parents at a very young age. And we also know that the case of Phulamani from Bengal, that the little child who was married off to a young man, and she died because the man attempted to assert his conjugal rights, and the case became flared up into a national scandal. Phule was married off at a young age, and Savitribai Phule came into his life. This girl was barely not even in her teens, and Phule was also not even in the teens. I think they were 6 and 11 when they were married off to each other. But thankfully, both of them kind of grew up together, and eventually what Phule did was he taught his wife to read and write. Savitribai was taught by Phule and some of his other friends also to read and write. Savitribai taught her neighbor to read and write. The neighbor was called as Fatima Bi Sheikh. They lived in a multicultural locality in the eastern parts of Pune. And together these people started a school eventually for Shudrati Shudra children, that is children who came from not just non-Brahmin, children who came from all castes. His work was not limited to only people who were not Brahmins. He taught Brahmin girls also, he taught other caste girls also, Savitribai taught other caste girls also, and Brahmin students also studied in their schools. So within a period of 3 to 4 years between 1800 and I think 48 and 53, these 4 or 5 years they started schools, and these schools started branching out like anything. Within this period of 4 or 5 years, he started 18 schools in a small town such as Pune. In those days, I'm talking of pre-1857 days. Imagine the impact it must have had on children who were getting themselves educated, who were coming in contact with the British people, who were coming because their schools had to be inspected by the school inspectors in those days. It had a what we today call butterfly effect. Many students got themselves educated thanks to the efforts of Jyotirao Phule, Savitribai Phule, their colleague Fatima B. Sheikh, and many others. Here I have put a specific quote from Phule, which gives a different twist to the, in those days, what was the dominant theory. That theory is called as the theory of Aryan invasion. We all know that Max Muller made a glaring mistake by writing in one of his essays that the Aryan race was similar to the other Indo-Aryan speakers. So the mistake was not in showing the affinity. The mistake was in the fact that he mixed up language with race. See, today you and I are speaking with each other, interacting with each other in English, in Hindi, but that does not make us belong to the English race. There is no such thing as an English race. There is no such thing as a Marathi race. There is no such thing as a Bengali race. We only have languages, and that is a skill that can be acquired. Even if I do not know the language, remember I just quoted the little couplet from Tagore's poem, Chitta Jetha Bhayashunya. So that does not make me Bengali by blood, because there is no such thing as being Marathi by blood in the first place. Forget about Bengali or being English or anything. Point here is that Phule is trying to invert, he is trying to, make it topsy-turvy, the concept of an Aryan invasion. In those days, we all know that the high caste, high class people of India and also in many other parts of the world were thrilled at the idea that the languages of North India and the languages of Europe are similar sounding, and it was like long lost cousins who were separated long ago, and they are now meeting with each other. So the high caste people in India felt really happy that it's okay, we are being ruled by the British, but in fact British are our long lost cousins, so it's not so bad really, even if we have lost the power. That was the idea. So the Aryan invasion theory was lapped up by the high caste and high classes, the Bhadralok, if you like, people especially in North India, because this theory was soothing for their egos. This theory was helping them. It almost had a therapy-like effect, in the sense that they felt that it was nice to know that our language and the British language has got many words in common. Our language and the German language has got many words in common. That means really we are being ruled by our cousins. It's not so bad. Phule tries to completely change the scenario by saying that these Aryans, I'll just read the quote. Recent researchers have shown beyond a shadow of doubt that Brahmins were not the aborigines of India, the aborigines whom the Aryans subjugated or displaced. The aborigines whom the Aryans subjugated or displaced, they appear to have been a hardy and brave people from the determined front which they offered to these interlopers. So he is trying to invert the category and saying that Brahmins are not the aborigines. So basically his argument was that, okay, you guys have come from outside and now it's time for you to go back. Just the way later on people said, go back, Simon. Here Phule is saying that, okay, Brahmins are not the aborigines, so they can go back. This is something that really scared the people who were trying to subscribe to the ideas. And even subsequently, we know that Dr. Ambedkar has also taken up this ideology, and Dr. Ambedkar also says that this Aryan invasion theory is not really applicable. He calls the Arctic home in the Vedas as absurd theory. He says it's absurd because if there were horses in the Vedas, and horses cannot survive in the Arctic region, so he says that there's no justification whatsoever for this theory that the Aryan people have come from Arctic region. Point here is that Phule is trying to subvert the ideological framework of Aryan invasion that was prevalent in this period. And what is he trying to establish? Is he only being an anarchist by saying that you are wrong, you are wrong, you are wrong? No, he is trying to give a different and alternative framework to the thinking of Indian society in general and Indian history in particular. But in that, he is trying to resort to what I have called as the strategy of denial and assertion. Okay? One, he denies certain things. Two, he asserts certain different alternative things. What does he deny? He is denying the centrality of Vedas in understanding the Indian history. We know that up until this period, Vedas were considered as the most important source because they are indeed the oldest surviving Sanskrit text. Text in the sense from the oral tradition, but still it is a text. They tell us, they describe us what society was like as far as the second millennium BC is concerned. So any argument about the Indian history used to have Vedas as at the center of this argument. Now Phule denies this centrality to Vedas. He says that if God intended the Vedas for emancipating the entire human race, why are they composed only in the Sanskrit language and not in the numerous other languages which human beings use? Because humanity uses all sorts of languages. They use English, they use Hebrew, they use Arabic, they use all sorts of languages. Why are the Vedas not composed in all those languages? Basically trying to subvert the centrality given, the importance given to the Vedas, and saying that this is not going to be a universal ideal, even if you may want to say that Vedas, they include universal knowledge in them. They are repositories of knowledge. They are apaurushaya, that is, no human being has created them. They are created by God, all those things. But he says that I don't give that kind of importance to the Vedic tradition. Thereby, he is trying to attack the centrality of the Vedas, one, the centrality of the high caste, high class, Sanatana Dharma, the predecessor of what is today called as Hinduism. He says that that is only one of the many traditions. That's not the central tradition that I will subscribe to, that is Phule will subscribe to. So what is it that he is trying to do? Here I'll take help from Partho Chatterjee's theoretical framework. He has observed that India possessed a lot of many indigenous cultural resources by which India could maintain her independent spiritual identity. The utopia which Phule seems to have envisaged had its roots in all these indigenous cultural resources. Phule was smart enough, he was intelligent enough, and he knew the society from a completely different perspective, and that's why I underlined his caste location in the first place. He did not belong to the same tradition that all these high caste people belonged to. He had heard different stories, he had heard different folklore, he had heard a different language being spoken, in the family background. So he picks up a completely different tradition and says, this is the tradition that I choose as my ideal tradition from the past, and I'm going to follow this in order to create my utopia. The utopia which Phule is trying to envisage, it had its roots in what has come to be called as the little tradition of Indian history. Unlike the mainstream great tradition of all these big gods, Sanskrit books, all those things, he says that I'm not going to subscribe to that kind of a tradition. I'm going to choose a different tradition as my ideal tradition. And what is that? He says that unless and until we have all these different kinds of people coming together, we can't have an ideal nation which fits the imagination only of a minuscule percentage of Indian population. He says we can't really subscribe to their ideal as our ideal. And hence, when Phule was approached by Ranade to be a part of the Indian National Congress, which was not in this case, be a part of one of the literary congregations of Marathi Granthakara Sabha. But basically, he was getting invited by people from higher castes and higher classes to be a part of what is today called as quote unquote mainstream. People were saying, don't be different, come and assimilate into what we call ourselves as the mainstream. He says, unless the Shudras, Atishudras, Bhils, Kodis, all the people of this land of Bali, he calls it not the land of Bharata, not the land of Hindustan or anything, he calls it the land of Bali, become learned and capable of thinking, there can be no unity of the people, no nation. So what is the worth of the National Congress that has been founded only by the Brahmins? Tries to point blank question the existence of the Indian National Congress, calling itself national, without really being inclusive. His idea of well-being, his idea of an ideal world is an inclusive idea, wherein he is trying to say that unless the people who are Shudras, Atishudras, people whom you have so far, you as in, he's addressing this letter specifically to Ranade, so people whom the high caste people from the society have treated as untouchables, unless all these people, then Bhils and Kolis, these are people from the various tribes living in the mountains, unless the people from different geographies, people from different caste locations, who are the real descendants, who are the real inhabitants of this land of Bali. Unless they become learned, they become capable of thinking. That is, you give them the tools to emancipate themselves, to realize their potential. How can we have a nation? How can we have an unequal race when somebody who's driving a super fast car and somebody who's cycling away to his environment friendly destination, they can't have an equal race. Phule is trying to underline this in his program of nation building here. So he is saying that this kind of an unequal coming together, mainstreaming of people is just not acceptable to me. So I will not be party to such attempts at tokenism. You are a good you are a good representative, so come and sit in our club and we will discuss the dreams for our nation together. He says, I am not going to be a party to such such parleys, such discussions where everybody has not been given an equal opportunity to realize their potential. Now, what is this land of Bali? Do you have any idea of what Bali denotes? Is there a folk story of Vamana and Bali in your the stories that you have heard? Have you heard of the story of Vaman Avatar of Vishnu?
Yes, ma'am.
So what does the story say? Who was Vaman and who was Bali? Perhaps you may not be familiar with the story because perhaps many of us are not aware of this story because Phule comes from, again, I underline, a different social caste, location, geographical also, location. He has been raised listening to these stories of, folk stories of different kinds of people. And I'll just narrate the story of Bali and Vaman for those of us who are not aware of the story. It is said that there was this, once upon a time, there was this great king called as Bali, Bali, and this was a very just king, and his praja, his subjects were very happy about his rule, and world was fine. But what happened was, once he became a very, very popular king, the Lord Vishnu came to know that people are fond of him more than me, that is Lord Vishnu. So Lord Vishnu felt threatened that he is more favorite of the people. People are worshipping him, or they are kind of idolizing him more than me. So Vishnu took an avatar. He took a form in order to put him in his place, figuratively speaking. And he goes to this king called as Bali, and he says, in the form of a Batu, a small little Brahmin child or a teenager, adolescent. And he says to Bali that I want a donation from you. And Bali, being a very kind king, he, without asking what kind of donation is he demanding, he says, okay, it's given. Tell me, what do you want? And Vamana says, not much. I want only 3 footholds of land. Teen Paul in Marathi, foothold. I want only 3 pieces, small pieces of land. So Bali says, okay, given to you. Go ahead, and which piece of land do you want? And then Vaman starts expanding his body magically, and he becomes very, 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 very big, large in his avatar. And the first foothold he puts, and he occupies the entire Prithvi. The second foothold he puts, he occupies the entire Swarga. The earth and the Swarga, heavens, they are occupied in his 2 footholds. And for the third foothold, he says, where should I keep it? Keep my third foothold. I want 3 footholds, you have promised me. So King Bali, being a humble king, he says, okay, you can put it on my head. And so Vamana puts his foothold on the head of this King Bali, and he presses him down into the land of Patala, into the land of the underworld. That's how Bali is eliminated from the face of the earth successfully by Vamana, by Vamana, that is Vishnu's avatar. And the folklore goes that since then Bali has been living in the underworld, and it is only on a particular day, that is the day of Diwali, one of the days in Diwali, it is called as Bali Pratipada, the first day after Lakshmi Puja. On this day, Bali comes back to the earth, and he is the king of the earth on that particular day. And women in the rural households of Western Maharashtra, they use this specific sentence to say that let all evil be dead and let the kingdom of Bali be restored when they are performing puja on that particular day. Ida pida taro Balicha Rajya Yevo. Phule picks up this specific tradition, and he says that we belong to the land of Bali. We belong to a land where once upon a time, we had a great king who was loved by his subjects and who has been deceived by the Brahmanical tradition to go and be pushed down into the underworld. So always, always, always in the writings of Phule, you will find this reference to the tradition of Bali. Now, you and I know that Bali was not a real king, nor was Vishnu a real person, nor was Vaman a real person. But for rhetorical purposes, for polemical purposes, for the sake of argument, Phule is saying that, okay, your tradition is imaginary, so I might as well choose another imaginary tradition, and that tradition is of Bali. So he makes use of this myth of Bali at various places in his writings and says that if we want all the people from different underprivileged classes and castes to come together, then these people are really people who are subjects of King Bali. If we want these people, that is Kingdom of Bali means, or Land of Bali means, basically he's trying to speak of the Indian subjects, but he's saying that we are not from the land of your Bharatas and Kurus and that great tradition. He's choosing the little tradition. He's choosing the tradition with which he has been familiar as far as his upbringing is concerned, and he's choosing the tradition with which not only him, it is his audience also is familiar with that tradition. So once he says that we belong to the land of Bali, it means people know that we belong to this land which has been, we belong to those publics which have been deceived by the higher castes, taking our gullibility, taking our generosity and misusing it. Again, I will draw your attention to the earlier story of the crow and the cunning fox. The crow is decent enough. The crow is foolhardy, perhaps, or simpleton enough to listen to what the fox has to say, and he drops the piece of bread from her beak. But that does not make her the stupid person. It only means that she was gullible enough and the fox was cunning enough to deceive the crow. And Phule is trying to rewrite story, rewrite history, rewrite his dream of a utopian society in these changed terms with a different perspective. So what is the contribution of Phule as far as trying to imbibe certain social values or his ideal of well-being when he's trying to paint a picture of an ideal society for his audiences? And here it goes. There are a few points which I thought I should underline from the writings of Phule. First and foremost, of course, he is trying to provide an alternative to two things. One is the hegemonizing discourse of the modern West, that everything Western is modern, everything modern is good for you, and everything traditional, everything Indian is substandard, it's not good enough for you. He says, no, that's not the case. My tradition is also a healthy tradition. You give us the Aryan theory, but I don't subscribe to that theory. So he's giving an alternative to the discourse of the modern West. The discourse which tries to hegemonize everything, discourse which tries to say that our ideology is the best ideology and your ideology, we don't care about it. He's saying, no, we don't do that kind of a thing here. Secondly, he's providing an alternative to the high caste Hinduism as well. So he's saying that fine, I'm not going to subscribe to everything that is Western, but I'm also not going to subscribe to everything that is presented as if it is the Indian tradition. Because the things that are presented as the Indian tradition are not really things which every Indian or every person from our society has been a part of. These are things which are familiar to a select class of our society. So I don't subscribe to that kind of an argument either, is what Phule is saying. When I said he's denying the centrality to the Vedic tradition, this is what I meant. The high caste Hindu traditions, yes, we have Vedas, we have beautiful texts there, and they contain a lot of lovely information about the society which was 4,000 years ago existent in northwestern parts of India, today's Pakistan and Afghanistan. All very fine from socialist point of view, yes. But Phule is trying to say that that's not the only tradition. He's saying that we also have this tradition of Badi, we also have this tradition of other, what can be called as the little tradition. Of course, the words great and little are also again loaded terms, but still the tradition which does not subscribe to the high caste, high class Hindu ideals. So he's saying, I'm going to be equidistant from the hegemonizing discourse of the modern West and also from the high caste, high class traditions which are presented as if they are the only Indian traditions. Basically, he's trying to say that our traditions are textured and we have the choice to choose which tradition we will subscribe to. Thirdly, his contribution to the ideas of well-being and the ideas of what kind of social value should we invite is that he is seeking freedom from political as well as cultural subordination. Here I'm indicating the debate which has been kind of overemphasized as far as the Bombay presidency at least is concerned. The debate is about whether social reforms are important or political reforms are important. And Phule is saying that political as well as cultural subordination, both these things need to be fought against. He wants freedom from both kinds of subordination. So he is not saying that I'm going to make a choice and I'm going to say everything that is British is very good because the British people are going to help me have education. Yes, sometimes he has to choose the lesser evil and sometimes he has to collaborate with the British. But Phule is also the person who fights with the colonial administrators, who also talks about subverting their political influence eventually if they do not pay heed to the rightful demands of the Indian people. So he is not somebody who's has been seen as a comprador of the British colonial rulers. He is not a comprador. He makes no bones about it. He does not shy away from underlying the responsibility of the Queen and the British administrators. There are many quotes I could quote from his writings, wherein he says that he is addressing the Queen Victoria, and he says, "Are you sleeping? Why aren't you paying attention to the conditions of your subjects?" So, if somebody has the courage to say that to the Queen, definitely we cannot call him somebody who's a comprador. Definitely we cannot call him as somebody who made a compromise with the British authority. Yes, he made use of the emancipatory spaces which were made available by the colonial rule, but at the same time he maintained distance from the oppressiveness of the colonial rule as well as the oppressiveness of the high caste, high class arguments of cultural mainstreaming of the entire Indian society. He offers an alternative route to a utopia, which may be called as a subaltern utopia, if you like, or a utopia for the underprivileged people. So he chalks out a different route, chalks out a completely alternative kind of a route which route towards emancipation for the Indian nation has been envisaged by many people. Gandhi imagines a utopia in his Hind Swaraj. There is the ideal drawn out by Rabindranath Tagore. There is the ideal drawn out by many other different thinkers of the 19th and the 20th century and over the other previous centuries as well. But Phule here has a different route for a utopia wherein all the underprivileged people can also realize their potential in an equal, equanimous fashion. And perhaps finally, yes, how does he propose to construct such a utopia for the underprivileged people? First and foremost, he says that I'm not going to subscribe to the mainstream traditions that all these high caste, high class people are subscribing to. I am going to choose my own different tradition, and that tradition is that of Bali. I just narrated the story of Bali, the story of a king who was just towards his subjects. So he has a different tradition in his mind to which he can fall back on, or to which he can look upon as the ideal, glorious past. Myths are necessary for everybody, but Phule says, I'm going to make sure that I choose a different myth than the others. Secondly, he says that we have an identity of suffering. The Prajajana, the subjects, all of us are subjects and all of us are sufferers. So he says that we have this identity together, wherein all of us are suffering at the hands of one colonial authority, secondly the authority of the high castes, thirdly the authority of the texts, the traditions, the whole heritage of hierarchy that we have got. He says that we are not going to subscribe to all these things, we are going to subvert these structures which are imposing suffering upon us. Thirdly, he says that within the underprivileged, the subaltern, the people who are dispossessed, within them also there are plural identities. So your suffering and my suffering, your being a subaltern or underprivileged person and my being an underprivileged person may be of different textures. Some person may be underprivileged because of her caste location, another person may be underprivileged because of her caste location as well as her gender, as well as her being in a rural location. So there are different textures, different reasons and different perspectives to one's being underprivileged. And he recognizes that all of these are equally important. He does not say that only caste disposition is important and gender is not important. He gives importance to being underprivileged in terms of caste, in terms of class, that is money wise, in terms of gender, in terms of race also. It might not be out of place here to say that one of his books, he dedicated the book to the white people of the United States of America who helped the blacks in their struggle against racism. So he values empathy in the minds of the whites also. It's not as if he's saying that all the whites are bad, all the Brahmins are bad. He's saying that there are these white people who have empathy for the black people and they are fighting for the rights of the black people in the US. And he dedicates the book to all these people who have empathy in their minds. So Phule is very aware of international politics also. For this, he deconstructs the Brahmanical tradition. He says that if Vedas were to be meant for the whole universe, why aren't they written in all the languages? So deconstructing the traditions which have been tom-tommed as, or which have been advertised as universal. He says that there's nothing universal about them. And finally, he chalks out a constructive agenda for reaching a utopia that he has envisaged. And that comes in his book called as Sarvajanika Satya Dharma. A religion, a way of life. I won't call it a religion per se, but a way of life which is adhering to nothing but truth. And it is meant for all people, Sarva Jana, all people. So a way of life which he has chalked out for all people, and a way of life which is based on truth. That's how Phule has envisaged his utopia. I think it's time for me to stop with my presentation here, and thank you all for the patient listening, patient hearing that you've given, and maybe now it's time for all of us to pose a few questions, perhaps ask questions or put forth your comments or draw parallels perhaps from your traditions. I'm sure that West Bengal also has a very healthy tradition of people who try to subvert hierarchies. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the very thought-provoking exposition on Mahatma Phule. I personally feel very refreshed intellectually, and I'm encouraged to learn more on his works and philosophy. I just want to share a few observations, not questions. First of all, thanks for clarifying the name in the first place, because for non-Marathi speakers, it wouldn't have been uh, easy for us to understand the difference between Jyotiba and Jyoti Rao. As for me, I thought that Ba is some honorary name given to him, because in the net set syllabus also it's written like that. So thanks for that. And the story of the Bamana that you said, that is also very enlightening, because that version was not known to me at least, and that tradition of Diwali, it is also not common here, that you mentioned about the king Bali, because we have the story that whenever Vishnu took an avatar, it was to save this universe and humanity from something bad. That is the story we are being told in popular culture. And so Bali has been portrayed as a vicious demonic king from which Vishnu needed to save the people. That's why he had to took that avatar. So that's how thanks for sharing the alternative version of the story. And also I am very amazed how Mahatma Phule has discarded this Aryan invasion theory in that point of time, because it is only in the past, I think, 10 to 15 years that with the strong strong proofs from genetic studies and interdisciplinary studies, rather, from the archaeologist and physicist and everything coming
Anthropology.
together. Yeah, anthropology. I was also recently reading that book, The Early Indians. Yeah, so there only it is the theory is the Aryan invention theory is discarded with strong proofs, and I think that's only in the academia. What people believe is has not changed. I think what most people believe, it has not changed yet, but it's only in the last 10 to 15 years. But at that point of time, he's denying this theory. That is, I'm very amazed at that. So, and thank you, ma'am. And really, I'm interested more in reading about him and learning about him. And the session is now open for discussion. I would like the students to ask their questions or share their observations with ma'am. And I think you can also speak in Hindi. That would not be a problem. So feel free to.
Just to add a little bit, A Gardener in the Wasteland is a graphic novel that has been published, which helps us understand Phule's way of thinking, and it's a beautifully done little book called as the A Gardener in the Wasteland.
Okay, ma'am. We also have our research scholars. Moitri, do you have any question or observation?
नहीं मैम, क्वेश्चन तो नहीं है, लेकिन बहुत अच्छा लगा, आपका लेक्चर बहुत ही एंजॉय किया है। ऑब्जर्वेशन बोल सकते हैं, क्योंकि जो ज्योतिबा फुले ने किया है, अम्बेडकर ने भी करना चाहा है, कहीं तो मैम एक लैक रह गया है। ये इस बारे में जो अभी भी उन लोगों ने जो करना चाहा था वो अभी भी क्यों हमारे समाज में ठीक तरह से एप्लीकेबल नहीं हुआ है, इस बारे में आप क्या बोलना चाहेंगे? कहाँ पर हम लोगों का घाटती रह गया है, क्या लैक रह गया है कि हम लोग उनके बारे में उनको सोच को हम अपने समाज में अप्लाई नहीं कर पा रहे हैं 100%?
थैंक यू मैत्री जी। क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल से हम लोग करेज नहीं दिखा रहे, हम लोग इतना धैर्य नहीं दिखा रहे, इतनी शक्ति नहीं दिखा रहे कि समाज कुछ भी कहे, हम जो हमें समझ में आ रहा है, जो हमें करेक्ट लग रहा है, वो हम बोल सके। तो शायद से हैंड होल्डिंग ही जरूरी है। एक तो हम अभी तो बोल सकते हैं कि पैंडेमिक की वजह से आप आपके घर में, मैं मेरे घर में, मेरे स्टूडेंट्स उनके घर में, कहीं ना कहीं तो हम लोग एक दूसरे का साथ भी फिजिकली तो नहीं दे सकते अभी पैंडेमिक की वजह से, मगर मन से तो हम एक दूसरे के साथ जुड़ना ये बहुत नेसेसरी चीज है मेरे ख्याल से। ये बहुत ही जरूरी है कि हम जो लोग एक दूसरे के जैसा सोच रहे हैं, या जो लोगों को ये समझ में आ रहा है कि ये जो कुछ चल रहा है वो अच्छा नहीं है, इसमें थोड़ा बहुत बदलाव लाने की जरूरत है, तो हम एक तो एक दूसरे का साथ हमने लेना चाहिए। आजकल हमें लगता है कि क्यों मैं किसी की मदद लूं, क्यों मैं किसी के साथ मेरे ख्यालात जो है वो शेयर करूं, कोई जरूरत नहीं, मैं और मेरी तन्हाई वैसी थोड़ी सी चीज हो गई है। तो हमें एक दूसरे के साथ आना चाहिए, वन, एंड सेकेंडली साथ आने के बाद हम करेज से, धीरज रख के हमने अपनी बात लोगों के सामने रखनी चाहिए। रूल्स तो है काफी सारे, हमारी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है ब्यूटीफुल, और राइट टू इंफॉर्मेशन है हमारे पास, तो बहुत सारे लीगल प्रोविजंस हैं, मगर आजकल हो ये रहा है कि हम लोग सब, जैसे वो प्रोफेसर अपूर्वानंद ने कहा है कि वी आर बिकमिंग अ मूक सोसाइटी। हिंदी में मूक का अर्थ क्या है? मूक मतलब बोल नहीं सकते हम, MOOC मूक। लोगों को लग रहा है कि एजुकेशन चल रहा है ये सब ऑनलाइन, बट इन रियलिटी सच में ये हो रहा है कि हम मूक हो रहे हैं, हम बोल नहीं रहे एक दूसरे के साथ। तो एक दूसरे के साथ ये जो संवाद है, आपको तो पता ही है, संवाद कौमुदी नाम था जो उन्होंने जर्नल ये शुरू किया था। तो संवाद इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, डायलॉग इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। दीज डेज हम लोग क्या करते हैं, हम लोग सिर्फ अभी आप बोलेंगे कि बोल रहे हो आप, हम लोग सिर्फ, हमें जो लगता है वो मोनोलॉग करते हैं, हम सिर्फ भाषण देते हैं। संवाद होना, एक दूसरे के साथ डायलॉग होना, टू वे ट्रैफिक होना अच्छी चीज है। हमें कहीं फास्ट जाना नहीं है वन वे ट्रैफिक में, टू वे ट्रैफिक है तो एक दूसरे को देखेंगे, सोचेंगे, समझेंगे। हाँ, थोड़ा बहुत एक दूसरे के साथ संघर्ष भी हो सकता है, एक दूसरे के साथ हम क्वारल भी कर सकते हैं, झगड़ा भी होगा, मगर वो साथ लेके जो आगे बढ़ना है वो बहुत मेरे ख्याल से इम्पोर्टेंट है। तो संवाद बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है।
थैंक यू मैम।
थैंक यू।
हाँ, इस बारे में मैं सिर्फ मेरा एक ऑब्जर्वेशन, मेरा एक फीलिंग्स मैं आपके साथ शेयर करना चाहूँगी। देखिए मैम, जो हमारे जो कंटेम्पोररी इंडियन फिलोसोफर्स है, जिसमें जो भी सारे हैं, ये वेस्ट बंगाल से भी हो सकता है, जो भी है महाराष्ट्र से भी, तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि उन्होंने वो जो बाउंड्रीज है, वो जो प्रॉब्लम्स है, वो उन्होंने फील किया था। क्योंकि जो शूद्रों का जो प्रॉब्लम है, अम्बेडकर के पहले ज्योतिबा फुले के पहले भी तो बहुत सारे लोग थे, लेकिन उन्होंने पढ़ा, उस बारे में, उस प्रॉब्लम को जाना, उस प्रॉब्लम को रियलाइज़ किया। हम लोग अभी क्या कर रहे हैं, प्रॉब्लम है, हम सबको पता है, रियलाइज़ भी कभी कभी हो रहा है
कि नहीं ये ऐसा होना नहीं चाहिए, लेकिन आपने जो बोला हम लोग सच में ही मूक बन के बैठे हैं। हम लोग वो फील नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, और फील कर पा रहे हैं अपने अंदर, लेकिन उसको हम अप्लाई नहीं कर रहे हैं, किसी को हम लोग बता भी नहीं है, देखो ये प्रॉब्लम है, यहाँ पर जाना मना है, लेकिन क्यों मना है? हम लोग वो पढ़ के, जो हमारा जो इंडियन कंटेम्प्रेरी फिलोसोफर है, उन्होंने वो पढ़ के वेद को जाना है, उपनिषद को जाना है, जान के उन लोगों ने खोजा है कि नहीं, यहाँ पर कहाँ पर भी लिखा हुआ नहीं है कि नहीं ऐसा कोई नियम है, लेकिन हम लोग वो पढ़ भी नहीं रहे हैं, और अगर जान भी रहे हैं लेकिन दूसरे के साथ हम लोग वो शेयर भी नहीं कर रहे हैं, ये मुझे लगता है। थैंक यू।
Thank you. Very true.
Ma'am, if you allow me to ask a very controversial question, do you think that if Jyotirao Phule, or Jyotirao Phule was present in today's world, would he have supported this reservation, caste-based reservation in academics and jobs? He wanted to uplift them, but would he have supported this reservation? I mean, till date, not the beginning, not in the beginning phase, but in today's world, from his philosophical point of view, what do you think?
See, reservations are something which is, it's not a Garibi Hatao program. Reservations are for representation. Reservations are for representation. So we need to know that. So it's not because somebody is poor or somebody is not getting any job. It's not a solution to unemployment of certain people. Reservations are meant to be a remedial measure for enough representation of all castes and classes in a given situation. So they may be in education, they may be in jobs. So the moment there is enough representation of all castes, reservations will become redundant. It's like saying that जैसे हम आजकल पैंडेमिक में ऑक्सीजन लगाते हैं, ऑक्सीजन कब लगाते हैं? जब तक आपकी बॉडी जो है वो खुद का ऑक्सीजन ले नहीं सकती और उसका कन्वर्जन कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड भी करके बाहर नहीं डाल सकती। तो जब हमारी सोसाइटी इतनी हेल्दी हो जाएगी कि हम अपने आप सांस ले रहे हैं और बाहर भी छोड़ रहे हैं सांस को, तो हमें ऑक्सीजन की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी। तो एज ऑफ टुडे वी आर स्पीकिंग ऑफ 2021, if you feel that in a given scenario enough castes all the castes have got enough representation in a given situation, in a given in a given structure, then definitely reservations are not necessary. But I don't see that happening as far as Indian any field is concerned. शिक्षा में अगर आप ये देखो, एजुकेशन के जो रिपोर्ट्स है वो देखोगे, तो ड्रॉप आउट रेट्स में अक्सर जितनी आपकी जाति पिछड़ी है उतने बच्चे ड्रॉप आउट ज्यादा हो रहे हैं। जॉब्स में आप देखोगे तो बैकलॉग किन पोजीशंस का है, तो जो रिजर्वेशन के पोस्ट है वो फिल्ड नहीं हो रहे। और इन अदर प्लेसेस आल्सो यू विल फाइंड, मीडिया में देखो आप, बीच में किसी ने, मेरे ख्याल से सुखदेव थोरात सर ने ये किया था, स्टडी किया था, ऑल द मीडिया आर कंट्रोल्ड बाय पीपल हु बिलोंग टू हाई कास्ट्स एंड क्लासेस। तो ऐसे अगर इनफ रिप्रेजेंटेशन नहीं है तो रिजर्वेशंस लाजमी है, ये मेरा मानना है। ज्योतिराव फुले ने क्या किया होता, ये अभी हिस्ट्री में तो मुझे पता नहीं कि इफ्स एंड बट्स को कोई जगह है या नहीं है, बट ज्योतिराव फुले ने ये तो किया होगा, जरूर किया होता, जरूर he would have done this. He would have definitely spoken against injustice, because as I told in my lecture also, he did not spare anybody. If he can speak to the queen like this, are you sleeping? He says, Rani Bai, jhop kashi yete? How are you sleeping? How dare you sleep? The way Greta Thunberg, for example, is saying, how dare you? How can you carry on with your lives as if nothing is happening? Similarly, Phule was somebody who dared to speak to the powers, to speak against the powers that were there. So today also he would have definitely spoken against the powers if the powers were not working for the underprivileged people. पावर आपको आता क्यों है हाथ में आपके, ताकि आप अपने समाज को एक अच्छा लाइफ दे दें. Power is not for you to enjoy, power is for you to improve your society. That was his approach.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Do you have any other observation questions? Okay. I think students are in the thoughtful phase. I think we can get in touch with ma'am. If you really have questions, I think we can take your questions and then get in touch with ma'am. And so as of now, thank you once again, ma'am. It was very interactive, today's discussion. And I would now request Dr. Debabrata Saha, respected head of our Department of Philosophy, to give the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Anunna. Thank you very much, madam, for your thought-provoking lecture. Your lecture enriched us and has opened a new vision to go for research on Mahatma Jyotirao Phule. Hope all the participants also enjoyed your valuable lecture. Thank you again, madam, for your virtual presence with your rich and thought-provoking lecture.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Debabrata, we can end today's session.